the prince comes to the wedding unannounced, and he tells the father, or tells the old man, "I'm watching. You abuse her, and you will pay a price."
You're watching the Spotlight Network, starring Hollywood's newsman, Logan Crawford.
They now believe a single member.
He works with TV and film legends. And now, Logan's shining the spotlight on the world's top emerging authors and creators.
International were abducted.
This is Spotlight with Logan Crawford, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV.
I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're talking about a powerful book. It is called A Notable Woman, and it is written by a terrific author. His name is Don Anderson. This compelling book brings new depth and insight to a mysterious woman from two kings, revealing courage, faith, and strength that transcended culture and history. If you're interested in Bible study, hidden scripture stories, and strong women of faith, this is a conversation and a book you won't want to miss. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Don, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. What first drew you to the story of the notable woman in Two Kings?
I was in the ministry, and I had a devotional every morning. I read a couple chapters of the Bible and stuff. And a friend of mine asked me, we were having coffee together. He says, "Do you have any heroes?" I said, "What? Heroes?" And he said, "Yeah, somebody that you look up to, that you admire." And I said, "Yeah." I just happened to be reading that part of the Bible, and it just came alive to me. And suddenly I'm looking at I'm reading something for the first time. It's I'm seeing it in a totally different light. I'm reading between the lines and realizing this is a huge story. This lady was a hero. And so as I looked into it, I said, this lady was unstoppable, and I really appreciated the read. That's how I got into it. And as I read more and as I understood, a lot of people they think of a hero as like David in the Bible, or my friend, his hero was Teddy Roosevelt, and but there are so many heroes that are just not mentioned, but they are every bit as heroic, and this lady was one of them.
Wonderful, wonderful. Why do you think her story remains largely overlooked?
Oh, it's so easy to do. I mean, there's so many stories that are overlooked. Like I said, I must have read that. I read the Bible over 50 times, and I must have read that story, more than that probably. And I think the thing is that the story was so abbreviated, you had to look and search between the lines to find out the rest of the story, how the story works out. And I think when we have an abbreviated story, we just don't focus on that. We focus on the bigger picture and stuff. And this lady was and her narration was so abbreviated that I think people just look past it.
Yeah. For the folks at home who aren't familiar with the biblical story that you're talking about, tell them about it a little bit.
Okay, here is a woman who was married to an old man, and she is indomitable. But anyway, the biggest part of the story I found initially was when she went out, and there was a prophet named Gehazi. Anyway, this woman lived in a town that was a Canaanite town. It wasn't Jewish. What Elijah was doing there on a regular basis, I don't know. It doesn't say. But Elijah's walking by. She comes out, and the true translation, it says she took hold of him and pulled him into her house. In the Middle East, that would be a big no-no. That would be huge. And then she got to, she recognized the power in the man. That she recognized the authority in the man, and which is really interesting because her husband never met the man,
Mhm.
and that's how. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm losing track here, but
No, we're giving an overview of
okay.
the biblical story
Yeah,
with
she
the
pulls
notable
him
woman.
into the room. And then she recognizes, and then she has her goes to her husband, asks to build a room on the roof for him to accommodate the prophet when he comes into town.
Mhm.
And she has dinner with him on a regular basis. Her husband never attends, which is
Mm.
strange. And then with all the favors she did building the room, the prophet says, I want to do something special for this lady. Call her in. So she comes in to the room, which is another thing. She comes into the room where she built for him
Mhm.
without escort, without chaperone, into a single man's room, up to next to his bed. And he asked her, what do you want me to do for you? And then talk to the king or the commander of the army. And she says, I've got my own people that I can work with. I mean, I've got my own king. I've got my own army. I don't need anything from you. So he asked Gehazi after she leaves, what can I do for this lady? And Gehazi said, well, she's married to an old man. That's how I know that he never met the guy. And she has no children.
Mm.
So he calls her back. This time she comes to the door, but she doesn't go in. She
Mm.
stops at the door, which tells me she's a little intimidated now. And he tells her this time next year, you will hold the child. And her response was fascinating. Don't lie to me, man of God, knowing that this is a man of God, but don't lie to me, man of God. And it and it's part of the story is she has the child. The child is about 5 or 6 years old, goes out to watch his father work in the fields, and complains to his father that he has a headache really bad. And the father tells the servant, take him to his mom. And he takes him to his mom. The child is sitting on her lap, crying and moaning, and slowly dies.
Mm.
Here's her dream, her one chance at the dream that she had, and he slowly dies. So what does she do? What would be the normal reaction of a woman whose only child, her dream, dies in her lap? Most people would um, scream,
Yeah.
cry, make a fuss.
Yeah.
She quietly picks him up, carries him to the prophet's room, lays him on the prophet's bed, and closes the door. The reason she does that, in the Middle East, one of their customs is, well, in a lot of places still, one of their customs is if you die in the morning, you're buried before sundown.
Mm.
And so she didn't want that to happen. So she goes to her husband, she puts him in the prophet's room, closes the door, goes to her husband, says, I want to go to Mount Carmel to see the prophet. And which is odd because first she has dinner with the guy a lot. Then she builds a room for a stranger that the husband's never met. Now she wants to go spend the weekend with the prophet in Mount Carmel.
Yeah.
It's a little suspicious.
Yeah. It's particularly for that era, no doubt.
But the father reveals himself there. He never asks about the child.
Mm.
He's a dirtbag.
Mm.
And so she goes to the prophet and tells the prophet that her child died. Prophet comes to uh, Shunem and lays on the child 7 times, raises the child back up from the dead, and then
Mm.
she picks up she picks up the child. Or no, she doesn't. First, the first thing she does is turn around to the prophet when she sees her living son who had been dead.
Mm.
She turns around to the prophet, drops to her knees, takes hold of his garment, and says, "Thank you,"
Mm.
and then goes and picks up her son, and that's the end of that part of the story. And so and it was a fascinating. There's so much more into that, and that's what I just, as I started reading it, the story just came alive to me.
Yeah. What characteristics of a hero do you feel she had?
Um, she never quit. She never gave up on the dream. Um, she the one thing that stood out to me the most in her uh, series there was when she didn't cry out when the child died.
Hmm.
She soberly picked him up, carried him to the room, and laid him on the prophet's bed. What she didn't let go on tears until she comes to the prophet, drops to her knees there when she first tells him that the child is dead, and said, and crying, weeping, saying, "Did I ask a child of you? Why did you do this to me?" And she held herself all the way up to there, and that was the finally catharsis moment for her.
Hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
anyway, that's my take on it.
Yeah. You spend time in the Middle East. Tell us a little bit about how that influenced your storytelling and the understanding of this story.
Okay. I was in Desert Storm, the wind down of Desert Storm in Dhahran, and I would drive into the city proper from Kobar Towers where we stayed, and there was this Bedouin shepherd with about 50 goats off to the side of the road, about 50, 60 yards off the side of the road. And I'd sit there and I'd gone, that's interesting. I've never talked to a Bedouin. I've talked to a lot of Saudis. And so on the way back from Dhahran, I decided I'm going to see if he'll talk to me,
Hmm.
or we can just have, you know, one kind of conversation, as much as I can with somebody that maybe not speak English.
Hmm.
So I come up to him. He's about the mid 60s, and he speaks with a rather proper British Arab accent. And he's been educated in England. He was sponsored by a couple there, yes, a Saudi couple there, and was educated in England. So he knew Christianity, he knew the stories, um, and so I learned a lot from him. And that's where I learned about, if somebody dies in the morning, they bury him before the day is out. The other part is there's a lot of things that he brought to light that I didn't realize. Like in the Bible, that when Jesus is baptized, a voice comes from heaven when John the Baptist baptized him and says, "Behold, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased." Well, there's much more to a much bigger caveat to that.
Yeah.
When a father had a son, he would take him to the city gates and when he was of age and could do business, he would introduce him to the city elders and say, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. He can now do business in my name."
Hmm.
And that was profound because when Jesus was baptized, everybody knew the caveat to that. This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. He can now do business in my name. And that was the day he started in God's business. So the guy taught me a lot. I mean, and in the customs, why women walk behind men and stuff like that. There was just a lot of things that I was and he wasn't offended when I asked him,
Hmm.
which was really good. Um,
And I imagine women walk behind men so the men can protect them, basically, right?
sign of respect.
Yeah.
It had nothing to do with protection. It had to do with respect,
Hmm.
which I thought was interesting. Because at the airport one time, I'm at the airport picking somebody up, some dignitary, and I see this couple, this Saudi couple, walking hand in hand.
Hmm.
I mean, everybody sort of stared and stuff, and I thought that's profound. But yeah, that he taught me a lot of customs that
Yeah.
really helped me understand a lot of the Bible, actually.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. What was it like writing this book? What was it like drilling down deep into this story and doing research and so forth?
Oh, it was eye-opening. I never knew that Shunem was a Canaanite town. It was a city with a Canaanite king and a Canaanite army who were vassals of the Israeli king at
Hmm.
that time. I it just the as I'm writing it, all of a sudden this stuff comes. Well, why would she have a baby now when the husband has been ignoring her for all these years? And then I came up with the idea that it could be that he just got bitter and got abusive.
Hmm.
And and so you just fill in the story, and it just sort of came alive on its own. As I filled out one part, the next part came alive, and then as I filled in that part, the next part came alive. It was not a hard story, not hard to
Hmm.
write. It's a little shorter than I wanted, but
Yeah.
it's my first book.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. When choosing a biblical woman as a hero, obviously the first woman who would come to mind for many would be the Blessed Mother.
Yeah.
What made you choose to focus more on a notable woman and not on the Blessed Mother?
Well, I thought about that too, but it's just where I was taken. I saw this. I
Hmm.
said, I no, everybody knows the story of Mary, but they
Yeah,
don't know the story of this lady. And I said, I need to tell her story.
yeah,
It became an obsession actually
yeah.
to tell her story.
Do you see parallels between her and Mary?
Um, yeah, in a fashion, but no, not really, because there's no demonstration of Mary being a profoundly strong, aggressive woman.
Mm,
You know, I mean, she had Jesus, and uh, she was beautiful, and she had her own story. I can't imagine what she went through when they found out she was pregnant
yeah,
and wasn't married. And
yeah,
so, I mean, there was quite a story there, but um, I don't know. I just knew inside I needed to tell this lady's story.
yeah. Absolutely. For the folks at home, give them an overview of the book. What will they find within the covers of your book? Tell us how you tell the story and how it unfolds.
Well, that unfolds with her being 16 years old and having her father making an arranged marriage. If you're married in that part of the world, 99.99% of the marriages in those days were arranged.
Hmm.
And so 16 years old, she finds out her father is arranging a marriage with this old man who is an ugly, mean-spirited old man. And it's almost like a sentence of death. And she
Mm,
said to herself in the book, I will be his wife, but I will not be his slave.
mm,
And she looks him square in the eye, which is unheard of. You don't do that. And gives a response to a conversation they're having. And then she meets a young prince who is 16, who is being betrothed to somebody he doesn't know, who is abused by his overseer, his tutor. And so she stands up for the boy who is abused. And what's the typical of, I used to counsel adolescents at a psychiatric hospital.
mm,
And one of the things of abuse is the flinching and the lack of eye contact and stuff in an abused child. And so I tried to portray that in the story. And but she stands up to the abuser. The abuser hits her. He gets mad and he takes it on the abuser. Finally, he stands up for himself. He stands up for somebody else, actually, and then stands up for himself. So then the story moves on. She is getting married. She marries this old man. And in the process of marrying him, the father of the girl realizes he's not been a nice man.
mm,
He's been obsessed with the wealth of this old man. He's been obsessed with trying to gain wealth, but he's not been obsessed with taking care of his family. This is all personal to him, was about the wealth. And so he realizes that. And so he tells, saying, the husband or the man that's going to marry his daughter, listen, I'm watching.
mm,
You abuse her, I'll know about it.
mm,
And then the prince comes to the wedding unannounced. And he tells the father, or tells the old man, I'm watching. You abuse her and you will pay a price.
mm,
And so she's got protection and she sees that. And she can use that as leverage in her relationships with this guy. She's scared about having marital relations with the man, but she never does. Not
mm,
until later, much later years later in the story. And she takes over the household. And she's met by a rather unfriendly head person lady that was in charge of the household and in charge of the budget and stuff. And she takes that and uh, um, draws a line. The girl is him and her mother, her and her mother had rehearsed what was going to happen because she knew pretty much what was going to happen. And she tells the lady, "Listen, you can be either take care of my chamber pot or you can be in charge.
Hmm.
Which one is, one of the two?" And and then in the story, that's when Elisha starts coming through the town and she sees this prophet coming by. She reaches out, grabs him. Gehazi, I feel, was probably the reason he came to town there because I think Gehazi was a Canaanite
Mhm.
because he had to do the interpretation for Elisha and stuff. So I'm sure Gehazi was shocked and mortified that this woman actually came out and grabbed the prophet and pulled him into the house. So, and then the prophet, and then we talked about having the child. He calls her in and tells her she's going to have a child. He says, "Don't lie to me, man of God." Well, she has a child. The child dies. Prophet raises the child back from the dead.
Mhm.
Then the story doesn't end. It goes on into chapter 8 of
Mhm.
Second Kings, and where he comes and tells her she needs to leave the town because there's a famine coming. And in the story, I wrote down that her father, she's not going to leave her family there. She's not going to leave her father and mother there. So she tells them about it. They coordinate a move to Astaroth, um, Ashkelon, I mean. And because if you're going to survive a drought brought on by no water, best place to move is the coast because you're going to have food anyway.
Yeah.
And so, and then they become successful and stuff, and they meet an Egyptian merchant there, and the father does the same business the merchant does, and they become successful. But it's time to move back. The famine's over, and then she finds that her land that her husband left her, her son, has been taken by a servant and been lied to and false documents and stuff like that. So she goes to the king. Well, who happens to be there but Elisha and Gehazi? And as Gehazi is talking to the king, see, the thing when she went to the king in the book of Ruth, um, not Ruth, but well, there's a lady character. I just went blank. But anyway, she goes to the king in Babylon, and she knew that if she went into the king and the king didn't call on her, she was dead.
Mm.
They were going to execute her. Well, it was the same thing in Shunem. That was a typical process, and so she goes in to see the king, risking her life. And Gehazi recognized her and said, "That's the lady that Elijah raised from her son from the dead." And the king already knows her because this is the same guy that was the young prince.
Mm.
And and says, "Is that you, Martha?" I'm named her Martha. She's never been named in the Bible.
Right.
She only identified as a notable woman. She was never, so I said, "Yeah, I'm going to name her Martha." It's ancient Arabic for head of the house.
Mm.
And so he says, "Is that you, Martha?" And then I wrap up the story with they're getting together. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, "Do they get married?" I said, "That's a romantic mystery."
Exactly. Wonderful. You've really taken great effort and great care in fleshing out this notable woman that you named Marta into a full-fledged book of her own, and it's quite fascinating. Have you envisioned it adapted into a film?
What's that?
Have you ever envisioned your book being adapted into a film or a movie or something like that?
I talked to one person that they said, yeah, they said that would be a good movie. That would be fun to watch. And I
Yeah.
said, well, talk to somebody.
Exactly, exactly. Well, you've put the work out there. That's the hard part. You've written the story, and so hopefully somebody in Hollywood picks it up and wants to turn it into a film. I think it'd be terrific. I think it'd be a very, very interesting film, biblical based, and of course, a great, strong role model for women and people in general. If you were to pick another biblical character to focus on for your next book, let's say, so I'm already helping you with your next book, who would you focus on?
The centurion.
Hmm.
I came to a realization one day that the centurion that Jesus was so impressed with and said, "No greater faith in all Israel have I seen," than this centurion. And the centurion that stood at the foot of the cross when Jesus died and all these miracles happened out there, and you sit there and he says, truly, this is the Son of God.
Mm,
And the centurion, Cornelius, in the book of Acts, the 10th chapter of Acts, they're all the same man.
mm,
How would a centurion standing at the foot of the cross know to attribute what was happening out there, all these miracles happen, to a criminal hanging on the cross behind him,
mm.
unless he had prior knowledge of the man?
Yeah.
And then so Cornelius goes to Caesarea, which was their furlough place, pretty much. And he's confused. How can this be the Son of God and him be dead now? How
Mm.
can that happen? So I'm on chapter 27 of that book now.
Okay, great. So I was prescient there. I figured you'd pick out another biblical figure to write on, and you did. And so the name of that book will be called The Centurion, or
The
have you come up with
centurion,
a
yeah.
title? Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, his story is quite remarkable, and I think you're smart to drill down on that and flush that out for the faithful and for readers, because it is quite fascinating. And again, I think that's another book that would be translated into a film very, very well. So how are you enjoying this new hat that you're wearing as a writer?
Well, I'm enjoying it. I always wanted to write, but I was busy. Was in the military, and I was very busy. I was a first sergeant, and then I got out and worked while I was going to school. So I worked two full-time jobs,
Wow.
and then I was a chaplain, and I went to school full time,
Hmm.
and but so I didn't have much time to do anything. But my wife, she passed away about a year and a half ago after
Sorry.
53 years of marriage,
Oh,
and but that's when I decided, before that, actually, I was writing on the book, but that's when I decided I'm going to write as many books as I can before I'm done. See, I
yeah.
plan to live to be 136 and die because I got hit by a bus while I was running a marathon. So,
That's the way we should all go out. Exactly. That's great. That's great. Has this writing and this research on the Bible strengthened your faith? Has it impacted your spiritual journey?
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
especially with Cornelius, with the Shunammite woman. Yeah, that was a notable woman. That was good. But with Cornelius, I started to understand the Roman. I did research for 2 years
Mm,
on the Roman government, Roman military, the Roman attributes, their society, and stuff like that. And as I realized, when he came to Palestine, which was a name that the Romans gave to that region,
mhm,
um, he when he came to Palestine, he had all this Roman theology, all this Roman thought process going on, and it was remarkably changed
mm,
over a period of time. And as I write the story and fill in the blanks,
mm.
yeah, it it impressed me. I said, well, if this guy can be convinced, why should I be?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. And so you've A Notable Woman is your first book. Second
Mhm.
book you're working on right now, and you're many chapters into it, is The Centurion. Have you already started calculating book three?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, that was the first book I was going to write, but I wanted to do this Notable Woman. Um, I can talk about it now, but in
Sure.
1975, in November 1975, I'm working intensive care at Travis Air Force Base in
Mm,
California. And about 2:30 in the morning, one morning, um, the door opens up. And then we had no patients in intensive care that night. It was two nurses and two medics. And the door opened up, and these three guys in flight suits and a cop were pushing this gurney into the intensive care unit with this old guy on it that had a beard and looked in distress. And I said, what the heck? And the charge nurse was not happy at all. They just come into intensive care with a patient without calling ahead of time. But the guy said, we've got clearance. But there was two guys in flight suits that had no insignias, and one guy with a flight suit that had flight surgeon's insignias.
mm,
And finally, we get the guy settled in, and I said, what's this all about? And he turned to the flight surgeon turned to the other guy, and one of the guys in the flight suit with no insignias, and said, can I tell him? And he says, yeah. And then the guy turned to me and he says, "You realize this is confidential. You can't talk about this." And I said, "Sure." So I gotten permission since then.
Hmm.
But this was 50 years ago. But anyway, uh, this doctor was at Elmendorf, Alaska. And they in about 10 o'clock at night, they got a knock on the door. He says, "Can you come with come?" This guy with the no insignias on his flight suit and a cop was with him and said, "Here's a letter." And he handed a letter from the base commander. And the base commander told him, "He will do all and everything this man tells you to do."
Hmm.
So he says, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" And he says, "You need to get in the car. We're going to the flight line." "Going to the flight line? Why?" And he says, "The letter." He pointed the letter and he said, "Okay, well, they get in the flight line, get down there. There's this C-130 cargo aircraft, all blacked out with red lights in the cockpit and stuff." And he says, "I need you to get in the airplane." He says, "Whoa, whoa, time out. I'm not going anywhere until." He says, "That was when I realized I'm not my own."
Hmm.
So they took off, they flew hour after hour, got refuel once. He's a flight surgeon, so he recognizes the system, and so he knew they got refueled, flew more hours. The airplane descended, and he says, "I realized we were coming in for landing." And he says, "We hit the ground. I thought we wrecked." He said, "We were bouncing and stuff." And the back of the aircraft opens up, and they're on a beach.
Hmm.
Didn't know a C-130 could land on a beach, but they can with certain equipment. And the guy with the flight suit with no insignias said, "Come on out." And so he flashes a light up on the hillside, and the light gets flashed back from the hillside. And pretty soon, five guys come down, four of them carrying a stretcher, and one guy with a rifle looking behind him. And all of a sudden, he hears this bat, 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 and it's bullets hitting the side of the airplane.
Wow.
And they jump into the airplane, take off. He just found out that he had been on the northern coast of South Vietnam in November 1975, after
Wow.
Vietnam had fallen. And I thought, that is a Tom Clancy book.
Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
a Tom Clancy. So totally different narrative.
Genre. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
genre. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally
awesome.
different
That's
genre.
great to mix it up. That's a fascinating story. I think you really got one there, without a doubt. And like you said, very, very Tom Clancy. So I was on the edge of my seat. I'm sure your readers, once it's complete, will be on the edge of their seats as well. Great job. Awesome. Well, the book we've been focusing on primarily today is called A Notable Woman. It is a revealing look at one of Scripture's most powerful yet uncelebrated figures. Don, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time, your insight, and the wonderful work you've done on this book and the other books that you have coming out as well. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time.